Hello, welcome everybody. We'll get started in a few minutes. Hello and welcome everybody. Good to have you join us today. See more folks are joining, so welcome. All right. We'll go ahead and get started just to make sure we have enough time for questions and for everybody to get to see the presentation and enjoy. So thank you for joining. I'm Stephanie Murphy. I'm with Junior Achievement. I'm the Director of Education in JA Finance Park. And I also need to thank TIAA, who is our official sponsor for Financial Literacy Month for the month of April. So thank you to them as well. I have the great pleasure of introducing Joshua Ross, who will be joining us for this presentation. He has a lot of hats and a lot of titles and does a lot of things, but Joshua Ross is the Director of Entrepreneurship at DU and will be providing the presentation today. So I will let you take it from here, Josh. Thank you. Oh, also, sorry, before you do that, I want to make sure, students, sorry, for all of our participants, at the very bottom, there's going to be a Q&A icon. You're welcome to use that icon and enter any questions that you have, and then we will make sure we allow time to address the questions that come from the presentation. So please make sure you're using that at the bottom. And now I will officially pass it off. Sorry.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, and it's a pleasure to be here today. I'm really looking forward to spending some time with everyone discussing cryptocurrency and most notably Bitcoin. You know, this is a very, very popular topic and one that you can't help but see on the news, in the media, social media. But it's a huge topic, and there's so many areas that we can cover. But in this time today, we're going to just do a short introduction on cryptocurrency and then dive into a little bit on Bitcoin. We're barely able to scratch the surface today, but those of you that are interested, there are many resources available to learn more about cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin. We'll talk a little bit about blockchain. I'm not going to really dive into NFTs, even though that's like front and center right now in the news. But what I do to learn more about these is I listen to podcasts. I follow a number of people, thought leaders on Twitter. I read a number of different books, which I'm happy to share out after this. And so there's just a lot of different ways to engage. So I'm going to start with a little story, which I think is kind of interesting. And it really kind of illustrates the rise of the price of Bitcoin and the perception of it. So I'm going to take you back to 2010. So most of you are probably pretty young at this point in time. And this gentleman by the name of Laszlo wanted to be the first person to use Bitcoin in a commercial transaction. What that means is he wanted to be the first person to actually pay somebody to purchase something using Bitcoin. So on May 22nd, 2010, so right about 11 years ago, Bitcoin was about 18 months old. Laszlo posted on a forum that he wanted to purchase 2 pizzas and offered to pay anyone who would deliver these 2 pizzas to him 10,000 Bitcoin. At that time, Bitcoin, the 10,000 Bitcoin were only worth about $41. So it wasn't a lot of money. Bitcoin didn't have a lot of value. Nobody knew what it was going to do, but he wanted to make this transaction. So somebody from California took him up on the offer and sent Laszlo's pizzas to his house in Florida. Laszlo paid the 10,000 Bitcoin to this person for the 2 pizzas. But that wasn't the end of the story. As you can see from this graph, Bitcoin had this meteoric rise up to about $60,000 per Bitcoin. Keep in mind, Laszlo paid somebody 1,000 Bitcoin for the pizzas. These two pizzas, roughly estimated today, would be worth $600 million. $600 million for the two pizzas. So I found this really cool breakdown of what that actually means. So for each pizza, they were roughly worth about $300 million. So every slice on the pizza was worth about $37 million. And then you break down the content of the pizzas. One tomato is worth $1.7 million. A piece of salami was worth $5 million. So you get the point. Those were very expensive pizzas. And if you're interested, you can actually follow Bitcoin Pizza on Twitter, and every day they update that based on what the price of Bitcoin is, what the price of those pizzas. So just a fun little story to start. So cryptocurrency, this is what we're going to talk about. And what I want you to understand about it, the goal for cryptocurrency is to allow people to transfer funds or anything of value without requiring a third party. And I'll keep talking about this concept throughout today because it is one of the fundamental things that you need to understand about the value and what cryptocurrency provides. So similar to Cash App or Venmo, it allows you to send money to other people. But what is different is it is decentralized. And what that means is there's no central computer or organization that authorizes every transaction. There's no central entity that every transaction must flow through. So this is very important. So with Cash App and Venmo, every time you send one of your friends or your parents money, Cash App and Venmo have to authorize that transaction. They have to say that you have that money and that the person you're sending it to has an account. And they check to verify all these things before they'll say, yes, you can send that money. Cryptocurrency works differently. It's a decentralized network of computers that authorize every single transaction. And what I mean by decentralized is the following. It's a peer-to-peer network. The computers on the network are distributed. They all have the ledger, which shows all the transactions and shows who owns what. And every time there's a transaction, they all must validate it and say, if person A is sending it to person B, person A has the money that they say they have, and person B has the account. So very different from a normal bank, a Cash App, a Venmo, where there's one single authority that has that validates every transaction. And we'll dive more into this in a few minutes. The second thing that's really important to understand is how cryptocurrency is kept secure, and why people trust it. And the reason is cryptocurrency, you cannot hack it because it uses what's called encryption. And encryption keeps the data safe. It keeps the data secure. So encryption in cryptocurrency is used to do a few things. It's used to generate the cryptocurrency. It's used to create it. It's used to verify the transfer of cryptocurrency from one entity to another. And it is used to store the cryptocurrency. So the way it works is it's actually incredibly complicated. And if we were really to dive into cryptography and encryption, we could probably spend about 10 weeks. But what's important for you to understand is it basically takes all of the important information in a transaction and it encodes it in a way, encrypts it, that only someone with the correct credentials can unlock the data to read the information. Only someone with the correct credentials can unlock the data to read the information. So think about this similar to your house. Somebody walking by your house can see the outside of your house. They can see the address. They can see the nice lawn, the lawn furniture. But the really important things, the important things that are inside your house They can only see if they have a key to the front door to get in to the front door. And that's what encryption does. It creates a way to keep anyone without the key out, not allowing them in to look at the data. So in this slide, this is an example, a small example how cryptography works. So what I did here is it takes any type of text, and this top box that you see, and I'm pointing to my other screen if you're wondering why I'm pointing over to my left, puts all this information into this box. And what happens is it runs it through what's called a SHA-256 algorithm. And it spits out a unique string of numbers and characters, 64 character string of numbers and characters. Based on the information that's put in the box is what's spit out into this, this string of characters of letters and numbers. So what I did is I took Eminem's lyrics to Lose Yourself, which is an awesome song, put it into this box, and it kicked out the 64 character string. And based on our current computing power, if anybody tried to crack this 64 character string to figure out what created it, what information created it, it would be almost impossible. It would take millions of years to figure it out. So this string of information that's created based on the text that's put in there cannot be hacked. And that's what secures the data with cryptocurrency. There's a lot of other things that go into this, but if you understand the kind of the basics and understand that cryptography is really what is securing the data on for cryptocurrency. So we're going to talk a little bit about the different characteristics of cryptocurrency, and a few things that I think are important to understand. So first of all, when you look at cryptocurrency, it's a medium of exchange. And what I mean by that is a medium of exchange is something that is accepted as payment or goods or for services. So the way to look at it is two parties agree on the value of the cryptocurrency, and they allow it to be traded for something else. So for example, if I had Bitcoin and we both agree that it's worth $60,000, that the party from which I was to exchange it with would give me something $60,000 in value. And that's what a medium exchange is. Two parties agree on the value. It is important that it has an agreed upon value. Otherwise, it would not be accepted as payment. The second thing is there's no intrinsic value of Bitcoin. There's no actual value of the crypto. There is only a belief that it has value. And what I mean by that is if you think about the US dollars in your pocket, what is the actual value of that paper that those dollars are on? It's almost nothing. What our US dollars are based on is the belief that it will hold value in the future. That $5 in your pocket, you are going to be able to use in the future, and it'll be worth $5 to exchange something of value worth $5. And that's the same with crypto. There's no intrinsic value to it. There's no physical form to it. All it is an entry in the database. And it has a belief that there's value. Something that I struggle with still putting my head around. But when I start to think about the US dollars in my pocket, the 5s, the 10s, the 20s, it's just a belief that they're worth something. And then it's a medium of exchange that somebody that I'm going to exchange them with believes that they're worth the value it says that they're printed on. Another thing that's important to understand about cryptocurrency, supply is not determined by a central bank. So in the United States, the Federal Reserve determines how many US dollars are in circulation available. And they can increase that supply at any point in time. With cryptocurrency, the people that created the cryptocurrency decide what it's worth. Or pardon me, not what it's worth, the number of supply and circulation. This is very important, which I'll talk about when we talk about Bitcoin in a few minutes. And every cryptocurrency has a different supply available. And currently, and I don't know how many of you in the audience are really into cryptocurrency and have traded cryptocurrency, but there's roughly 2,500, 3,000 cryptocurrencies available. And this changes on a daily basis. But there are a lot of different cryptocurrencies, a lot of different intentions for those cryptocurrencies, like what projects they're used for, what their intention is. So for every cryptocurrency, you can go do research on them. There's usually a white paper that talks about who the founders are, what their intention is for the cryptocurrency, how they intended it to be used. So it's pretty interesting to go look at. And then finally, anyone can create a cryptocurrency. So if any of you want to go create a cryptocurrency, you can. Usually costs about $135,000, and that includes creating the technology. There's hosting fees. There's a lot of legal documents you have to create, and there's government regulation you have to deal with. Okay, so what I'm going to focus on today is Bitcoin. The first and arguably the most popular cryptocurrency. It's definitely the most widely talked about, probably because it's worth almost $60,000. There's movies about it. There are books and songs about it. And it's popular because it is the most expensive cryptocurrency. And it was the first. So I'm going to walk through some of the important characteristics of Bitcoin. And you'll see some of the characteristics are very similar to when I was talking about the characteristics of normal cryptocurrency. So the first thing that's very important to understand, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, that it's created and held electronically. There is no physical form to Bitcoin. I don't have any Bitcoin in my pocket, nor does anybody else. It is a digital form of currency. As I said earlier, it's just a notation in a database. It's decentralized. And we're coming back to this concept now that I talked about earlier. No single entity controls it. The US government, the European Union, the Chinese government, 195 different countries in the world, no government has control over Bitcoin. It sits outside the control of government. It is managed by a decentralized network of computers, meaning it can't be shut down. Because if you shut down one computer, you have 50,000 other computers that are still operating the Bitcoin network. Why is this important? It's important because the governments can't control it and can't censor it. And this is one of the really important characteristics. So if you think about it this way, if somebody is accused by the government of doing some type of criminal activity like drug dealing or money laundering or anything else that the government deems illegal, they can go in and seize and freeze that person's bank account. Even if they're right or wrong, they can go and do it. They have the authority, and that person no longer has access to their bank account. With Bitcoin, the government can't do that because they have no control over it. A second example, and this one is very powerful, Cyprus is a small island nation on the Mediterranean Sea. So in 2013, their country was in this financial jeopardy. The government had made a number of very poor monetary decisions, and they were about to go bankrupt. So in order to receive a loan from the European Union required that Cyprus come up with some of the money. So Cyprus levied a one-time tax on their citizens. And the way they did it is as follows. They didn't go to the citizens and say, hey, we're going to tax you. Instead, one night, they went into every savings account in Cyprus, every person's bank account, and removed 10% of their savings. So if you went to bed one night and you had $1,000 in your account, the next day you woke up and you only had $900. They did that unilaterally. They didn't ask permission. That's where it's censorship. If you have your money in Bitcoin, the government's not able to do that. The next point is every transaction on the blockchain, which we'll talk about in a second. The blockchain is the underlying technology for Bitcoin. Every transaction that happened is anonymous, yet every transaction is transparent. And what I mean by this is the following. Every transaction between two entities, if I send somebody to Bitcoin, that transaction shows up on the Bitcoin blockchain. And anybody can go look at that transaction. You can go look from the very first Bitcoin transaction up to the one that happened 3 seconds ago. Everyone's available. So you can see where Bitcoin move on the blockchain and how it moves between entities. What I mean by anonymous is nobody actually uses their real names. Everybody has this thing called a public address. And it's just a bunch of characters, a bunch of letters and numbers. And that's what represents the each transaction. So it's transparent. If you go look at the transaction, you'll see a string of characters sent Bitcoin to another string of characters. You don't know who those characters are, but it's transparent that you can see every single transaction. And this was very important when they created Bitcoin, because with government and banks, you have no idea where your money goes when you send it from one entity to another. It just goes into a kind of a black box until it arrives at its destination. And then finally, it's open source. So the code for Bitcoin is designed to be public. It's managed by a community. Nobody owns it, and anyone can take part in it. So any of you could go down and actually download the Bitcoin software and download a copy of the ledger of all the transactions, and you can participate. You don't need any permission. You can just go do it. But if you think of the opposite, kind of closed source would be Apple. It owns all its software. It keeps it private. It charges people to use it. Bitcoin's the opposite. No permission, open to everyone, anyone can participate. So I talked about blockchain a few minutes ago, and this is where the transactions are recorded. So going back to what I was talking about earlier, there's no central bank or authority. It is a peer-to-peer decentralized network. So when Bitcoin is sent from one person to another person, that transaction of going from person A to person B needs to be recorded, that the Bitcoin changed ownership. That's where the blockchain comes in. Blockchain is this way to record every transaction, and every transaction that takes place is recorded on the blockchain and kept secure through what I was talking about earlier, encryption. So every computer node on the Bitcoin network, remember going back to that slide I showed of all these different computer nodes, it's a decentralized network, keeps a ledger of every transaction that has taken place. The blockchain keeps every one of those transactions secure. And every node on the blockchain or on the Bitcoin network has a copy of the ledger. We don't have time today to explore blockchain technology, but I would encourage all of you to look into it. It's a very important technology for storing information in a decentralized network. And it'll have a lot of different applications in terms of transferring anything of value from one person to the other. What's really popular right now in the news is NFT, non-fungible tokens, these unique digital properties being bought and sold. The underlying technology is blockchain. Okay. So we've discussed that the Bitcoin network is decentralized, and every transaction stored on the blockchain is transparent. But who validates these transactions? The nodes that we talked about. Centralized organizations such as banks and Venmo and Cash App and governments, what they do is they validate the transactions. but in a decentralized peer-to-peer network, who validates it? What you have is this concept called mining. Every transaction that happens must be validated by the nodes on the network. They must say, this is a valid transaction. When I send Bitcoin to somebody else, they need to say, Joshua Ross owns this Bitcoin. He hasn't spent it somewhere else. It's a valid transaction. He can send it to somebody else. This is what provides trust in the network. Miners are paid in Bitcoin for validating every transaction and making sure that every transaction is correct. You may be wondering, well, why would they lie? Why wouldn't they cheat? And the reason is the miners are paid in Bitcoin. So it's in the miners' best interest to be honest, because if there's no trust in the Bitcoin network, there is going to be no value in Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin that the miners own would have no value. This is what brings trust into the system. The miners keep people from double spending their Bitcoin, right? Because remember, it's digital, and anything digital like a Word document or a JPEG, it's very easy to copy, and you can take 1 to 2 to 3 to 10. So the miners must validate that somebody didn't create a second copy of it, of the same Bitcoin. They must validate that that has not been spent somewhere else. And the way mining works is you used to be able to mine on a laptop. The computing power on your laptop used to be able to allow you to do all the mining. But now, for certain reasons, mining is done in these huge data centers with thousands and thousands of computers validating transactions. And here's an example of these data centers. And these are ASIC processors. And these computers are only designed to do one thing: mine, validate transactions. They can't do anything else except that. So the value of mining is issues new Bitcoins. When a miner mines, they get paid in Bitcoin. It confirms all the transactions. And really what it does is it creates trust. Miners secure the network and process every transaction. So it keeps fraudulent transactions off the network. The more miners that mine, the more nodes that there are on the network, the more secure the network becomes. And it helps with distribution, because the miners expend so much energy and so much cost to validate the transactions, and then they get compensated on Bitcoin. Those Bitcoins have value. Okay, so how do you get Bitcoin? Well, you can mine, which we just talked about. You can trade with someone. You can find someone that has Bitcoin and say, hey, I want some Bitcoin. I have some cash. I have some US dollars, some fiat currency. I'll trade with you. And you can go meet them somewhere, and then you can give them your US dollars, and then they'll send you the Bitcoin based on that medium of exchange, what you agreed upon. The third way is you can buy it on an exchange. Kind of similar to if you think about where you could go buy stocks, equities. If I want to go buy a couple shares of Apple, I could create an account on my E-Trade or on E-Trade. I could transfer money into my E-Trade account, and I could go buy Apple stock. It's similar with cryptocurrency. There's a number of different exchanges, some based in the US, some based in other parts of the world. You can transfer your US dollars to the exchange, and then you can go buy cryptocurrency. Every exchange sells different cryptocurrencies. They don't all sell all of the crypto. And what's important is you can also buy a part of a Bitcoin. You can actually break up one Bitcoin into 100 million, what they call Satoshis. So for example, if you're like, I want to buy some Bitcoin, but I don't have $60,000 to buy a full Bitcoin, you can go buy a fraction of a Bitcoin on one of the exchanges. And it works simply like this. You have buyers. So I'm a buyer. I use my cash, or I use my debit card, credit card, and deposit it in the exchange. And the exchange holds my money. On the other side, they match me up with someone that's selling Bitcoin. And we come to an agreement on the price, and my money goes to the seller, and they have now US dollars, and I have a Bitcoin or a part of a Bitcoin. And it's really that simple. And there's a lot of different cryptocurrencies you can buy on these exchanges other than Bitcoin. And they range from a few pennies up to Bitcoin, which is about $60,000. So once you have your Bitcoin, you need somewhere to store it and keep it secure. This is where wallets come into play. This is basically a software program that stores your private and public keys. Your private key, another part of the encryption, is what assigns you the ownership of the Bitcoin. It basically tells the blockchain the owner of this Bitcoin is associated with this private key. You don't want to share those private keys with anyone, because if they have your private keys, they can take your Bitcoin. So what you do is you can store your Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies in your wallets. And most wallets they support a few different types of cryptocurrencies. It's different based on the wallets. You'll need to do your research. But there are many different types of wallets. There's hardware wallets, there's software wallets, there's hosted wallets, and there's actually paper wallets. The most popular are apps that you can use on your smartphone. One of the wallets that I use is Exodus. It's a very popular wallet, and that's where I store most of my Bitcoin. Giovanni goes, most exchanges require you to be 18 plus. What are the best ways to get Bitcoin as a miner? Yeah, that's very true, Giovanni. So there's a couple ways that you can look at it. Obviously, you can work with your parents to set up an account on one of the exchanges. The US-based exchanges have to follow US regulations. So they have to follow what's called KYC, know your customer rules, and anti-money laundering. And I believe that's why also they require you to be 18 or older. The other options are to open up a wallet and figure out how to just trade with somebody using your US dollars and completely bypassing the exchanges. So for example, in one of my classes, my Bitcoin cryptocurrency class or blockchain cryptocurrency class, we have students that for some reason, maybe they're international students, can't open up an account on an exchange. So what they do is they go directly to other students that have crypto and buy and sell directly with them. So there are other ways to do it. There are also ways to go and mine it as well. I hope that answered your question. Great question. Keep the questions coming too. I appreciate it. Okay, so a couple things about Bitcoin. And this is different than other cryptos, but this is really important to understand. Bitcoin is limited to 21 million coins that can be mined. That's it. So far, 18.5 million coins have been mined, approximately that number. 18.5 million are in circulation. So there's only going to be 2.5 million more coins mined. Other cryptocurrencies like Ethereum don't have a cap on the number of coins that can be mined. They have a cap on the number of coins that can be mined per year, and I believe it's 18 million per year. So it's very different for each type of cryptocurrency. What makes it interesting with Bitcoin too is if you limit that number is limited to 21 million, it cannot be changed. It's written into the code. I also believe that there's been a lot of Bitcoin lost. So that total number of 21 million cap will actually be a lot lower because so many people in the early days may have gotten Bitcoin was worth 5 cents, 10 cents, $1, didn't really keep their keys hidden or they lost them. So once you lose your keys, you have no access to your Bitcoin. And I think that happened a lot. The next thing about Bitcoin, it's easy to transport, right? As opposed to carrying a bunch of dollars, all you're doing is you're carrying it in some type of app, some type of wallet. And with that, it's also borderless. And this is what's so exciting about it. It is, since there is no government involvement, no government control, it can move around the world seamlessly and quickly without any guardrails, without any regulations. I can very simply send somebody over in Europe, over in Asia, Bitcoin for some type of product or service. And there's very few fees and there's no regulations. Any of you that have ever tried to trade, exchange crypto, or pardon me, currencies for, let's say you try to trade US dollars for euros or yen or yuan, there's just a lot of hoops you have to go through and there's costs associated with it. Crypto, it's borderless. There's no censorship, which we talked about earlier. The government is not involved, so they can't censor it. It can't be hacked. It's never been hacked. The blockchain has never been hacked. Exchanges have been hacked, but the blockchain which Bitcoin sits on has never been hacked. And as I said, every transaction is available to see on the blockchain. So one of the really important things to think about here is, and one of the true fundamentals of Bitcoin is that it's a trustless system. Think about the transactions that you make on a daily basis. We rely on an entity or a person or organization to sit in the middle of a lot of these transactions to validate them. When you go buy tickets on StubHub from somebody else, we require StubHub to put trust in that transaction, that the tickets that I'm actually buying are real. They haven't been used somewhere else. But in order to do that, we pay StubHub a fee, and the person selling the tickets pays StubHub a fee. We pay for trust. PayPal, when we send money to somebody else. Banks. Visa creates trust between the person buying something and the merchant selling something. What happens though when we when we pay for this trust, or when you require trust, it takes more time. There's transaction fees. The more entities that are in the middle of that transaction, the more fees there are. And it also puts power in a single entity, whether it be the government or the central bank. Bitcoin removes the need for a third party since it's a trustless system. Think about that. Think about all the different things that it can remove and lower the cost and make things faster. Okay, so the final thing I'm going to talk about today, the creator of Bitcoin. So Satoshi Nakamoto is a pseudonym for a person, a group that created Bitcoin. Nobody knows who Satoshi Nakamoto is. We don't know if it's a man, a woman, a group. What happened was on October 31st, 2008, Satoshi Nakamoto published a white paper to a cryptography mailing list, which went out to a small group of people that were really interested in digital currencies and cryptography. And Satoshi outlined the creation of Bitcoin. And this got this group really excited because it wasn't the first time somebody had tried to create a virtual currency, but it was the first time a number of problems had been solved that other virtual currencies could not solve. It solved the distribution problem. How do you distribute coins into the network? It solved the double spending problem. It solved the trust problem. And it solved the decentralization problem. This group became very excited. It was a bunch of early adopters. And so this group that Satoshi said, I almost called it a he, not a he, that quickly became involved. they were very quick to become part of what was at that time a project. How to build out the code, kind of how to build out the network, bring more people involved, bring more miners. Because the more miners that you had on the network, the stronger the network became. Keep in mind at this time, though, Bitcoin was simply a small project and had no value. I mean, maybe the Bitcoin, you could value it as a penny of Bitcoin, if even that. But it was an open source project that people wanted to be involved in. So Satoshi was very involved in the early years, helping to create adoption for Bitcoin, helping to improve the software because it was very buggy at the beginning, helping to mine and validate transactions at the beginning. And it slowly started to gain more and more of a following, more and more people becoming part of the project. And once it started to take off and was very well supported, and Satoshi felt it was in the right hands, Satoshi disappeared. Sent kind of a final email and said, I'm out. There are a number of conspiracy theories on who Satoshi is, but nobody knows. So why did Satoshi create Bitcoin? Well, the date in which Satoshi created Bitcoin is very important. It was in 2008. That was coming out of the financial crisis that started 2007, 2008. There was a huge distrust in government and the way government ran monetary and fiscal policy, really kind of the way they managed the US dollar. Satoshi did not trust the government and did not trust the government's decisions. Satoshi did not like the power the government had over our money, did not like the trust we as a community placed in governments, and wanted to create a currency that was outside the control of the government that people could use to transact, to make transactions, to use to buy and sell things that was out of the government control. This is why Satoshi created Bitcoin. I don't believe that Satoshi ever realized the actual success and the growth and the reach that Bitcoin would have. So remember what I said earlier. You can see every single transaction on the Bitcoin or on the blockchain, every transaction that has happened. So in the early days, there wasn't a lot of nodes on the network. So Satoshi validated a lot of transactions, did a lot of the mining, and got compensated in Bitcoin. All of those transactions, all of those Bitcoin that Satoshi received have never moved from the address associated with Satoshi on the blockchain. They've never moved, they've never been spent, they've never been traded. They just sit there and people watch it every single day to see if Satoshi will ever make a transaction, because everybody thinks then they could try to figure out who Satoshi is. If Satoshi decided to cash in the Bitcoin associated with its wallet, that Bitcoin would be worth today around $59 billion. But it has not moved. Satoshi would be the 20th richest person in the world with $59 billion of wealth. So it makes you wonder who it is, what their motive was, why they haven't spent any of the cryptocurrency, the Bitcoin. So it's a couple things to think about. And this is what I ask my students in my crypto class. What is Bitcoin? Is it an asset? Something that contains this economic value that has a future benefit? Something that we buy and hold like stocks, baseball cards, land that we hope goes up in value? Is it a currency? Is it something that we can use to buy and sell products and services that will be accepted by other people for the products and services? Or is it gold? Scarce, hard to mine, can't be duplicated. All these kind of properties give it value. Where is it in 5 years? Today it's around $60,000. Some people say it's going to zero. Some say it's just a big bubble that's going to pop. Others say it's going to be worth 1 million per Bitcoin. The questions when I ask my students, and they do this writing prompt at the beginning of the quarter, and I'm always curious to see, and I ask them again at the end of the quarter, sometimes their responses and their opinions have changed materially. Others, they haven't. And that's something for you to look at. So any questions? And I'll stop sharing now. Feel free to throw a question or two in the chat. Stephanie, I don't know if I can see any of the questions. Oh, there's one.
I just saw one.
Oh, I love this. How much crypto do you own? And is it all in Bitcoin, or do you own other coins as well? That's a wonderful question. I won't tell you the exact amount I own, but I had conviction about Bitcoin and Ethereum a while ago, and I should have bought a lot more. I did buy some, and it's done very well, but nowhere near. If I had matched my buying with my conviction, I would have bought a lot more. I personally believe I think Bitcoin's interesting, but to me, the crypto that I spend more time on and I've been buying more of is Ethereum. And the reason is Ethereum's a much different project. Ethereum is what they've done is they basically created a platform for other people to build projects on top of, applications on top of. So what they're doing is they're building all these different applications on top of it. In order to use the applications and in order to pay the programmers, everything's transacted in Ethereum. So I believe it's building a much wider community, and there's going to be a lot more opportunity in Ethereum. The difference though with Ethereum, as I said earlier, it's not capped, so they can keep creating Ethereum. It's capped at 18 million a year, as opposed to Bitcoin, which is capped at 21 million total. But there's a lot of other interesting cryptos out there, and a lot of other interesting projects such as Uniswap and Polkadot. And so what I would recommend is go do some research on them and read their white papers, look at what their intentions are, really look at the background and the history of the people involved in the project. What have they done before? What are their skill sets to make sure it's a legitimate project? And look and see if it's something you can get behind, because there's a lot of interesting crypto projects out there, all doing different types of things and trying to solve different problems.
And then there is another question. It was actually, let me rephrase this. So what percentage of your investments is in crypto?
I love that question. So Giovanni's asking kind of what my allocation strategy is. And it's about 2%. I believe that you should have a very diverse portfolio, and I believe cryptocurrency should be a part of that. So when you're looking at your portfolio, and also all you young adults, this is really important. And I have high school age students and one in college, and I explained to them, yeah, you should start saving right now and investing in stocks and crypto and different assets. But I look at it as having a diversified portfolio in land, property, cash, equities, which is stocks, and then 2 and maybe potentially 3% in cryptocurrency. I don't know, Giovanni, yet if I have the stomach to move that up, to move that needle to 5 or 10% yet, but check back with me in a year.
Don't see any more coming through, so we can give it a few minutes.
Did anybody in our audience buy crypto or buy Bitcoin when it was, so it had gone up to 20,000, dropped down to about 3,500? Anybody make that plunge at that time before it rocketed back up to 60,000?
Don't see any. Oh, there's one. No.
Okay, well, you know what? Thank you all for your time today. I'm going to drop in the chat. I think you all can see this. Let me see if I can put this in here. Yeah, there you go. I'm going to put my email address. And if any of you have any questions, you want to chat about crypto, want to reach out to see what we're doing here at the University of Denver, please do. As Stephanie said, I'm the Director of Entrepreneurship, and I always love to chat with young adults. That's what I do all day, and I love to engage. And thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone who joined, and have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.